Let's start in the order that you appeared. If you would start, Stan, with a brief.
Are we still on mute?
No, yes, he can hear us.
Okay.
You can hear us. Okay. If you could start with a brief introduction to who you are and briefly why you're running for governor.
Yeah, briefly. Are you looking for like a minute or something? I'm just trying to get a feel for that.
Why don't you take two to three max?
All right. Well, yeah, I'm Stan Pulliam. I'm the mayor of Sandy. Sandy is my hometown community. And so our movement kind of began a little over, about 2 years ago now with the COVID-19 pandemic and the restrictions and mandates that were coming out. And I'm somebody that, I was called in to a meeting with my small business owners over at Sandy Family Restaurant. And, when I walked in there as mayor, it just became very apparent that, these were folks that I knew my entire life. These were, people that I'd grown up with. They were my classmates, people whose kids went to school with mine and Mackenzie's kids. These were folks who sponsored my t-ball, basketball teams growing up. And so, when we looked those folks in the eye that day, we made a decision. We made a decision to stand up and show leadership. We did that through the COVID-19 pandemic. My wife Mackenzie's organization, the Oregon Moms Union, stepped up and took action to really support our children and getting back into the classrooms full time. And so this has really just been a movement that started that day in Sandy. Was later grown by parents and people from all over the state that we believe is going to take us to the governor's office. We've had a candidate that's taken on, the hard issues. We've never shied away from questions or where our positions are. We've demonstrated leadership as a past elected mayor, current elected mayor, where people can have an opportunity to see where we stand up and be accounted for in some of the biggest issues facing the state and our local communities. And I'm looking forward to your guys' questions here today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I realized that we were sitting around, so I didn't give the proper introduction. But if you have your cell phone on, please silence it. And this isn't a debate. We're here to make an endorsement, so we don't guarantee equal time for every candidate, but we do encourage you to make respond to other candidates and what they've said, and draw distinctions between yourself and other candidates. So we're going in order of when you arrived. So
arrival.
So Christine Drazen.
Order of arrival.
You're actually not that late, as it turns out.
I came through the house too. I just got here.
Hi guys.
What was the question?
Just a brief intro.
Oh, how long?
Who you are, why you run?
How long do we have?
2 to 3, and it's minutes, and we're only on candidate number 2. So Christine Drazen.
Hi guys, I am Christine Drazen, and I am a small town girl. I'm originally from Klamath Falls, and I talk about that all the time, mostly because I think it's really important to sort of help people better understand how I view the world. I think it's an important way to better understand who I am and how I approach public policy. So as somebody that was raised in a community that was dependent on natural resources, my family was impacted when that community kind of went belly up financially. And that creates a couple of things for me personally. It means that I really value family and community, and I also really appreciate the importance of the dignity of work and the importance of working really, really hard to achieve whatever future it is that you're pursuing for yourself. And so as I was growing up, I had, folks everywhere in our community, and especially in our family, that had nothing good to say about politicians. And that's not surprising given how they felt about how things were going for them. It's really about the environment that you're living in and the community that you're raised in. And that culture of really having some version of animosity towards people that were elected to serve really made a big impression on me. And from there, we moved over the hill to Eagle Point. I graduated from a little school, Eagle Point High School, outside Medford. And then I put myself through college at George Fox. And after that, I worked at a little public relations firm, Van Natta Public Relations, and they actually did some lobbying, they did some association management, and they started to talk to me a little bit about state politics again. And I took my little resume and I, peppered the Capitol with it, with all the newly elected Republicans that year, and had the opportunity to work in the majority office in that very first year, and stayed in leadership offices for the next 8 years. So I had the opportunity to work within an environment that was forced compromise, I would say. John Kitzhaber was in his first 8-year term during those years, and Republicans had majority control of the House and the Senate. And so in those days, Kate Brown was a new member of the House in the minority. And before I was gone, Betsy Johnson was going to be a freshman in that body. And so those were very different times. My husband and I got married somewhere in the middle there, and we had our oldest son, and that is really not a very conducive environment to raising kiddos. We had 5 special sessions following 9/11, and rebalancing the budget was very complex at that time, and I realized I needed to choose where my priorities are going to land. I came home to Clackamas County and worked at the Restaurant and Lodging Association, and then on from there. I ran for office in 2018 when my own state rep retired, and I was elected Republican leader 9 months after that. That did not happen by accident. I want to be a part of making a difference in the state. You don't get that done unless you raise your hand and say you're willing to stand up and be responsible. And that is what I did. I believe our state needs balance. I believe our state needs more accountability. And to get that done, I believe that we need, in fact, to elect a Republican governor this year. I am running for governor because I want to make a difference in the future of my state. I love this place. This is my place as much as it is everybody else at this table. And I want to fight for its future alongside Oregonians that care about the values that I do. So thank you guys for having me here today. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Bridget?
So hi, I'm Bridget Barton, and I moved here 43 years ago, 1978, married to my husband Curtis, 40 years, May 15th, right before the election, and we have 2 adult children that live in the area, which is part of the reason we're so committed to staying while many, many people are fleeing. So I think, we can all look at the state right now and say, what we see is the product of 30 years of campaigns that use wedge issues and some very bitter partisan fighting and power seeking. I'm running for office as the Republican outsider. And what I mean by that is I looked at this race, this cycle, and I think this state is hanging on a precipice right now. And we have to make this next 4 years about the people of Oregon, about solving the problems that we all see staring us right in the face, that I think the career politicians have absolutely ignored or left just to get worse and worse. And what I mean by that is education, crime, homelessness, the substance abuse problems that are out of control, the natural resource situation and the wildfires. These issues have to be addressed and not on this partisan playing field. So I'm coming in as an outsider. What I mean by that is I've not held political office. So I have no baggage. I don't owe anyone anything, so I can do anything. I have no interest in a long-term political career. I truly want to get in there and get some of these problems solved. And I would add that, oddly enough, even though I'm the outsider, I'm probably the most experienced person in the field, because I have spent the last 30 years sort of in this sort of thoughtful conservative background policy mode. And I have networks of people across the state to turn to work with. That's both sides of the aisle, but mostly obviously on the Republican side, but business leaders as well, to bring their expertise to these issues. I also have one unique thing in my background is that I'm 40 years in recovery, which I think really comes to bear on this entwined issues of crime, substance abuse, and homelessness. This is what we've got to get to the bottom of if we're going to save our state, that and the education issue. So that's why I'm running, and that's why I think I can win the primary and go on to win the general election, because I want to hold the people accountable who have not solved these problems and stay very, very focused on these kitchen table issues. That and the economic problems that are going to be coming our way and worsening by November are also going to be critical.
Thank you. Bob.
I still have to go to the bathroom. But
Oh.
no. I will. As soon as
It's a good way to start.
It's a long drive. You're telling me.
Sorry, I missed that
It
part.
is.
Do you-
Ice skating over the pass.
Yeah.
While we're talking about it, you know where the facilities are, through the store and to the right?
As soon as I'm done,
Okay,
I'll,
go ahead.
without any disrespect to anybody.
Yes.
Oh, wait. Right. Well, now you know my name is Bob Tiernan. I think this election is about leadership, experience, and the proven ability to solve problems. On my website, you'll find both my resumes. I haven't touched my business resume since I decided. I haven't touched my business resume in several years. It is what it is. I ask you to look at it and say, who would you want? Who would you hire to solve problems? My political resume is on there too. I'll touch upon that. But that's what the race is about. I think we all know what the problems are. They're right in front of us. And the problem is our problems have not been solved. And that's what motivates me to run. My background, well, I'll start off with, I have 2 adult children and 7 grandchildren within 100 yards of where I live. I take them to school 2 or 3 times a week if I can. And that is our future. It's certainly my future. It's the best part of my day. I grew up in the Bay Area. I went to a Catholic Jesuit boarding school. Graduated at 18, and if you put all those 4 things together, I was 18 going on 28, and went to Oregon State. Decided to go to Oregon State because parents took us down the Rogue River, and it was just gorgeous. And I just go, man, this is where I want to go. So I did, and had one of the best times of my life at Oregon State, perhaps too good a time. I was also on the rowing team all 4 years, a varsity letterman, and we were good. We actually beat Washington. For those who ever read Boys in the Boat.
Were you eights?
Not any, pardon me?
Eights?
I rode 8s, 4s, pairs, and singles. I was multi, but no, we won in 8s, and I won in 4s. I never won anything in a single or a double. It's
Teamwork.
It's teamwork. I was bow and in the engine room. I was 5. After Oregon State, I went on to law school at Seattle University. Got my JD. After Seattle University, I went on to Georgetown. Got my master's in law. Soon after that, I joined the Navy. Reagan administration had a need for some special Soviet analysts. They had 100 positions. They put out for 2,000 people. I applied. I got it. Spent 28 years in the Navy. Went in as a Soviet analyst. Came out as a Navy commander. And I was a targeting officer for the last 8 years, including duty on 9/11.
I'm sorry,
For-
targeting officer?
Targeting officer.
Targeting?
Targeting. I find targets. I'm a targeting intelligence officer, so we find, analyze, and direct targeting
Towards an individual?
towards whatever targets we've been assigned.
Okay. But targets could be people.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, especially after 9/11. That's what the targets were. All the bad people who were doing a lot of the bad things. Anyway, the Navy was taught you a lot about leadership. Taught you a lot about. I was a executive officer several times, officer in charge, and I was sent out on 16 special assignments outside the United States. In my time, I was a reserve officer, but I was reserve on call, and I went out 16 times and learned a lot. It's probably one of the things I truly miss because of the camaraderie and sense of duty and accomplishment. Between all that, I was a lawyer, and I enjoyed the practice of law, but to me it was a little bit on the boring side, so I always started some businesses on the side. Started 3 separate businesses, made some money, lost some money. The last one I scored. I managed to get the trademarks to Payless Drugstores, restarted Payless Drugstores, regrew the company, and sold it for a nice chunk of change. During and after that, I still do, many business clients, and one of my business clients had their president unexpectedly leave. And I've been their attorney for 19 years. They asked me to come on board for 90 days, stabilize the company until they could hire another Albertson, Safeway, Fred Meyer's, Kroger guy. And during those 90 days, I turned the company around. It had,
What's the company?
pardon me?
What company?
Grocery outlet. At the time, we had 110 stores. We had negative sales, negative customer count, negative ring, and it was going down the tube. The president unexpectedly left, and they gave me a special contract, and at the end of that contract, because the company was turned around and going back positive, they offered me the job for 4 years. I took it, and had a really good time there. Grew 30 more stores, opened 7 more in Oregon, and had a great time solving problems. That company, if we weren't solving problems every week, serious problems, we would have been out of business. And we flipped it around, turned it around. Cross between my business, my legal, and my military background, I knew how to get things done. After that, I went with Raley's. Raley's is a grocery store company a little bigger than Fred Meyer's. Does $3 billion of business, 10,000 plus employees. I was special assistant to the president. We helped turn that company around. I was also president to one of the subsidiaries, and turned that around. After that, I went back to my business practice after 3 years and scaled back and started to enjoy life a little bit more, working 3 or 4 days a week. And that's what I still do today. I still have my clients, still do client work. I've been lucky. I've been successful in the military. I've been successful in business. And I had a political career, which I'll talk briefly about. I was elected in 92 to 97 as chairman of the Crime and Corrections Committee, chairman of the General Government Committee. I have more legislative experience than anybody running in our group of 19 Republicans. When after legislative session, we had a couple of bills that were very important that did not get passed, and we rolled them out to ballot measures. Ballot measure 8 is probably one of the more famous ones. I am the person who found out about the pension plan of our state, the PERS plan. I took an ERISA course at Georgetown, and when they tried to pass a CERT bill, on page 28, after several minutes, I said, "What is this? You only have CERTs in 2 situations, and I don't understand how a CERT could be established for state employment." That's when we found out more people were retiring than making more money in their retirement than they were when they were working. And it went out from there. We stopped the bill and tried to pass pension reform in the legislature, failed, rolled it out to ballot measure 8, passed the people. I was a chief petitioner, as well as fundraiser, as well as spokesperson. And it was overturned by the Supreme Court, in my opinion, by political decision, in opinion by the minority in a 4-3 decision. The minority said, "How dare the majority substitute their political opinions for that of the people? The people have already spoken." Who helped write ballot measure 8? The law school professor from University of Oregon and Lewis and Clark. It was a well-written one, and it was a political decision, and it would have solved our problems. We would not be in the boat we're in now, putting so much pension money into our state budget. After that, it was ballot measure 8. I was chairman of Crime and Corrections. The one big bill that failed was taking the 7 top felonies and rolling them into changing our state laws. We had, I think murder was 8 years, rape was 3.5 years, armed robbery was 18 months, and it was sentencing guidelines was the rule. Flipped it over to ballot measure 8 and determinate sentencing, and that is still the law today. And as I've said, we've had, according to the District Attorneys Association study, we've had a 50% reduction in serious felonies. Ballot measure 17, also chief sponsor. I know, I'm up.
Your time's...
I could have gone through my entire...
Yeah, Stan, we hear you.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry we went on too long. I'll stop right there. Thank you.
You'll be fine.
Stan, do you want to start with your top priority if elected governor?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say we have to address the culture of criminality, you know, in especially Portland and across the state. You know, the fact that, you know, we've had more murders in the last year, you know, in Portland than at any other time, you know, in our history. We're already on track to beat that number this year. We have a Multnomah County DA that's essentially legalized violent crime in the city of Portland through catch and release policies. And we have strong proposals to step up and show leadership. You know, we're the That came right out on these issues, right out at the very beginning. We talked a lot about the fact that we want to triple the size of the state police and lift up these county sheriff and local police departments. You know, in the 1970s, we had 30 officers per 100,000 people. That number today is 8. And then we wonder why we're having all the problems that we are. I think one of the strongest things I'll do as governor is on day one, our officers will know that they have a governor who has their back. You think about all these incidents that happen, where the very next day we have folks like Joanne Hardesty and Ted Wheeler who do a press conference. They don't ever have the back and the side of the police officer who's trying to protect our communities. No, they got the backs of the criminals and the folks that are creating these problems. And I'm not talking about a culture of criminality. I'm talking about that young guy I see crossing the street at Lloyd Center with all these clothes draped over his arm. He's got women's clothes, adults' clothes, kids' clothes, tags still on. He's shoplifting. But he doesn't have a fear in the world on his face. Why? Because he knows that if I call 911, it's going to be over 15 minutes on average until I get an operator. It's going to be an hour until the officers show up, if they show up at all. They'll write him a citation at best. There's no consequences
Stan?
to the actions. So we're going to stand up and we're going to show leadership and more.
Stan?
Yes, sir.
So I'm just wondering, how is it working in Sandy right now? How are you dealing with this?
Well, you know, we have a fully funded police department in the city of Sandy. In fact, when I swore in an officer about 2 weeks ago, we became fully staffed. One of the only fully staffed departments that I'm aware of, you know, across the entire state. Now we have our officers, they've got more and more obstacles in front of them thanks to our state leaders like officers across the state. When dealing with folks, you know, homelessness in our community and crime and different things, you know, the same issues, these same things that are passed out of Salem, you know, they restrict our local police department as well. But we back the blue, we have a fully staffed department, our officers know that we back them, and comparably across the state, we have an incredibly safe community.
So Stan, what do you encourage your police department to do when they encounter a homeless person setting up a tent on a public street?
So we encourage them to engage with that homeless individual. We ask them to let them know about the different services available to that individual, but we also, you know, we point towards alternative places that they can go. But obviously our officers are under the exact same constraints that officers are across the state with a lot of the legislation that's passed out of Salem.
So do you have a head count of how many homeless people are in your community?
You know, the last time that we had our police chief in, I think, you know, we roughly have, you know, about a dozen homeless individuals throughout our community. A lot of them are homegrown, meaning people in our community, some that I've, you know, gone to high school with.
Okay.
But we've also had an influx of folks coming into our area, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic and a lot of the violence and crime happening in Portland. Just like many community members of Portland want to get out of Portland to Sandy, you know, it turns out, you know, so do some homeless individuals.
What's the 911 response time in Sandy?
What's that?
What is the 911 response time in Sandy?
You know, I've never called 911, but I can tell you this. We don't get the complaints. We don't get the complaints that come out and generate the news stories.
Well, you're spending quite a bit of time telling us how long the 911 response time is in Portland. Do you not know what it is in your own town?
Well, it's pretty obvious, but there's a problem. There's a problem in Portland.
Stan, you don't know what the problem is in your own town. You don't have a number?
We don't have a crime problem in Sandy.
You don't have a crime problem in Sandy.
We're city council and we don't have our local newspaper writing about response times because it's not a problem. You know, I'm very aware of things that rise to the level of my attention, but when we don't have a problem in the city of Sandy with our local community and our law enforcement, no, I don't know the exact response time.
Bridget.
Oh.
What's your, I'm rotating the order.
What was the question?
Top priority as governor.
My favorite thing to say here is that I've always been a working mother, so I can multitask. And I hate having to say that one problem, one priority is going to go above the others, because honestly, right away, I think a number of these have to be approached at the same time. But let me just touch. First of all, I agree with Stan in the sense that crime's probably on everyone's radar screen the highest. I go down into that problem more on the substance abuse side. I think you guys are the ones reporting that we're number 2 per capita in the country in substance abuse, and yet we're number 50 in treatment beds. So the substance abuse problem, I believe, and when I talk to sheriffs all over the state, they say the same thing. That's at the root of the crime problem, and it's growing. Of course, we have to have police, which we don't, and you have to have prosecution, which we often don't, but the root of it is the substance abuse. So I would be putting a lot of attention into that. And I want to take the time to mention, I think I'm one of the few candidates, at least have been since I started, saying that immediately in office I'm going to try to begin to marshal the forces of law enforcement across the state, parents groups across the state, and the treatment community across the state to put together a plan to refer ballot measure 110 back to the people. I feel strongly that, and what I hear out across the state is that people feel that they were snookered, for lack of a better word.
It's safe to assume you voted no on 110.
It is safe to assume I voted no, yes. Most people, I would say, in recovery, people in the treatment community voted no. This was not well supported there. Because we understand that from going to the homeless problem, that fundamentally what we're doing on the streets is not compassionate at all. It's enabling. And the numbers, the percentages of people on the street with substance abuse problems that are homeless, it's huge. I think it's understated usually. I don't know exactly how everyone measures when they measure, but I think I would venture to say it's closing in at 80 to 85% of the people that are homeless have substance abuse problems. Then when we passed ballot measure 110, we really just exploded the problem. And law enforcement will confirm that across the state. And of course, we see it coming in across the border, the southern border, then we see it coming up the I-5 corridor. People on the east side of the state claim it's coming up their corridor over there, but in any case.
I briefly saw a shake of the head from you, Stan. Maybe I was looking out of the corner of my eye. Do you have a difference of opinion on some people?
The only thing I have a difference of opinion on, and we can't expect all the candidates to be just watching what everybody's out there doing, right? But we've been pretty vocal about the fact that we want to overturn Measure 110.
Okay, all right, got it. All right.
Bridget, before we move on, whether you're elected governor or not, do you plan to pursue a referendum on 110?
I would join, not in office, I don't know that I would have the personal magnetism to put that together, but I would certainly be part of any effort to do that. A big part of it, a vocal part.
Sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Even though that measure raises a bunch of money for drug treatment, understandably hasn't spent it yet. And you seem to be in favor of.
No, doesn't raise money for drug treatment unless we see marijuana federally accepted. Hey, I get my news from you. and it's clear that the cannabis tax can't be used for detox, for inpatient treatment, or for outpatient treatment. It has to be used. And I've participated recently. I made an effort. I got a little nervous at the end in one of the so-called treatment options that was offered, which was a crack pipe giveaway and a needle giveaway over, up in North Portland. That was just overwhelmingly frightening to even watch. But this is not treatment. So treatment, I'm talking about detox, inpatient treatment, outpatient treatment, probably at the county level, in communities all across the state. That has to happen. Honestly, education has always been one of my biggest issues and is at the top of my list as well. And I would immediately appoint a new deputy superintendent of public instruction that shared my vision for schools, which is to take it away from a very leftist, ideological, agenda-driven curriculum to pure academic excellence. And that has to be the focus. We've got to get our scores up. My last understanding, these numbers all kind of rotate around, but they're all in the bottom 40s, 46th in the country, 47th in graduation rate. You probably all saw the recent news that in our biggest school district, half the third graders can't read a grade level. Students of color, even worse results. And the reason is the curriculum that we're using, and these things have to be immediately changed. We have to have a new vision of academic excellence coming down from the Department of Education, and I will stay on top of this until it filters down to every superintendent, every school. Last thing, the economy. I really think by November, we are going to be facing some serious problems. So every single thing that crosses my desk, every way I possibly can, I will be looking at ways to help working families who I think by then are going to really be struggling.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Christine because we only have 1 hour.
So, I think the amazing thing about having all Republicans here is that you're going to see that there's some philosophical similarities between us for the problems we see in the state. But as far as response for me, I think that the way that you get at more change, a true reset, is to immediately replace your agency heads and to have different leadership on your boards and commissions, which direct the policies of the agencies and the rulemaking from there, moving there forward. So from there, you get to actually get at what is happening inside our schools. You get to have an approach for whether or not you're satisfied with what's happening in higher education, whether or not workforce is enough of a focus. You can, in fact, begin to approach a whole lot of challenges within government that are significant from a leadership level on down. So from my perspective, just to be really succinct about it, we can talk education, we can talk public safety, community safety, homelessness, the investments that have been made at the state level, recent legislation, whatever you want. But big picture, the value and the benefit of a Republican governor in this next election cycle. You have the opportunity for true accountability, true compromise, and a real reset with people's approach to how government should interact with Oregonians. You can actually have government that assumes it needs to be mission-focused, mission-driven, transparent, accountable, and it needs to actually perform. So if you are the employment department, the expectation needs to be that you get those checks out the door. If you're housing, the expectation needs to be that you get federal funds, you build housing, or you adequately distribute grants. There cannot be one excuse after another, which is what we've seen.
So, give us a preview of. I was struck by you talking about accountability and why you were running, and in making the argument for a Republican. You're gonna be up not just against a Democrat, but likely an unaffiliated, well-funded unaffiliated candidate. Is there a reason a Republican? You feel a Republican can bring that kind of accountability versus the unaffiliated candidate running?
We're talking right now about the likelihood of Oregon's longest serving Speaker of the House winning a Democrat primary. And I'm not in that primary, so, who knows? But that's my understanding, most likely, outcome. And then also you have Senator Johnson, who, as I mentioned, she was a freshman in 2001. She has been holding a gavel inside Salem for a really long time. And she's been effectively holding on to that gavel by navigating the political process. Now, as a Republican in the minority, I adore and love working with people that are willing to come in the middle and compromise. It's important to the state, it's healthy, and you get durable long-term solutions from that. So from that perspective, Senator Johnson served an important role, providing that bridge between the far left and the minority party. But you also didn't get leadership there. And we're going to be able to have the opportunity for a real conversation about if you want accountability, if you want to actually come to the middle, what you need is to actually have the two sides. Not like a version of this side that's the one we've had for the last 20 years. Because we've seen Tina Kotek and Betsy Johnson's negotiations for 10 years. We know what that looks like. We don't know what those negotiations look like between a Republican governor and a Democrat legislature. And that's the real opportunity for compromise and change. She has effectively and successfully held onto a gavel all those years. You do that by allowing that agenda to move regardless of how it affects your community. By saying yes in committee to hold onto your gavel and then doing a symbolic dog and pony show on the floor and voting no. That's not leadership. If you really believe your party has abandoned you, then you stand up You run for leader, you raise the money, you elect moderates. That is not what we've seen. We're talking about somebody that's raised an extraordinary amount of money in a very short period of time.
Can I jump in?
Impressive, very impressive. I love that, which means that she could have been electing, just helping recruit and elect moderate Democrats all these years. But instead, she's maintained this position that her party's left her and it's broken. She was in a position to fix it. When I ran for Republican leader, it was to fix it. To elect more Republicans, to identify people, recruit people, and get them elected to office, to support my state, because we have to have balance. If Senator Johnson agreed, she had more than ample time to do that. I am looking forward to having that conversation.
Thank you for the preview. I got what I asked for.
Well, I got to jump in here, though. She's right that Johnson has never stood up and taken the opportunity that she had for the last 20 years to challenge her own party and say, these policies you're moving down are too far left and they are wrong and they're causing damage out there. But I have disagreed completely that what we need to do is have this sort of moderate approach where we all sort of meet in the middle. What the state needs right now is for a Republican to step up and put a very hard stop to those policies. We can talk about moving to the middle only after we really have put a hard stop to those. And someone needs to hold her accountable,
So I do think
Johnson
that this needs to be
accountable
clarified
for 20
very quickly.
years
And that
of
is
pushing these
the
policies.
idea, the best way that our system works, though, is the opportunity to force negotiations.
So is
It's
it
simple
fair-
math.
So understanding the disagreement between the two of you, would you both agree that in the candidates in this room, you're the more moderate Republican? Would you agree with that?
yes.
So here's the point that I
Would
think.
you agree with that?
No, I wouldn't agree with that, and here's why. What we're talking about is the importance of negotiations, right? And so you never, ever, ever say we're not going to veto. The value and the benefit of the governor's office is, if those negotiations don't serve Oregonians, if it is not a durable solution that serves Oregonians, you veto. But you don't say no to everything just because you're the Republican. Now, if that's what's being suggested, if that's what it looks like to actually be willing to govern and lead, and instead we're going to have some version of this where you're just going to say no because they're Democrats, that's not helpful.
So I have political.
I don't think anyone is suggesting that. I'm simply suggesting that we put a hard stop to those very leftist policies before we begin to negotiate toward the middle.
Is there a
But
Republican?
Bridget, wouldn't you call yourself liberal politically? I mean, you did that when you ran as an independent for the legislature.
We going back to 92?
Well,
Sure.
if we're gonna
Let's
be
go
the-
back to 1992, the Rust
Sure.
Perot
I
years.
think that-
You really get to claim an outsider mantle. Do you get the outsider mantle because every time you run for office, you're not successful? And I've just got to ask.
I believe I called
you're
myself a
saying
classical
you're
liberal,
partisan.
which is a
You're talking about
Jeffersonian
being
liberal.
partisan. When to OPB last week, you said you're somebody who doesn't engage in those kinds of conversations. And when you ran for office previously, you defined yourself, as a liberal politically. I'm just curious.
No, I did not.
So
So,
That's inaccurate.
Is the Republican Governors Association, do they have their convention between now and the primary? They
I
don't.
think they already had their conference.
Yeah, they've had meetings.
They've had their conference.
So are they getting involved in this race?
No.
No.
They don't get involved in primaries.
And they'll get involved after the primary depending on who wins?
Correct.
How about Donald Trump? Meaning, have any of you heard from him?
I haven't.
Or are any of you seeking his endorsement?
we asked this one already.
We seek the endorsement, we'll take the endorsement, we'll campaign with them.
So wait,
How about everybody else?
we've asked that we can skip that one. But Bridget, did you want to respond to Stan on two things? I think he made the point that you'd called yourself a liberal.
I was not.
running.
I ran as an independent in the Perot cycle. Yeah, I did not call myself a liberal. I'm a classical liberal in the sense of the Jeffersonian version. Does everybody understand what that is?
Yes.
Maybe not, but
The liberality of ideas.
of ideas, yes. And
Okay.
I've always considered myself a thoughtful conservative,
Okay.
not
All right.
highly partisan.
Great.
Was that the only?
That's enough, unless you want to respond to
I
his.
want to have Bob have the chance to answer the initial question.
Great, let's
Thank
do
you.
that.
Oh, right.
And that was, what was your number one
Number
priority?
one priority. It feels like 10 days ago, but in fact, it was only 30 minutes.
It does. the number one priority is providing the leadership to solve our problems that are facing the state, regardless of whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. The number one problem is keeping our neighborhoods and our streets safe. And I think we've lost our way there. Tied to that, of course, is homelessness and Measure 110, and lack of cops, and lack of prosecutors, some prosecutors who don't prosecute, kind of all tied together. But tackling that problem and restoring law and order in our criminal justice system to where it's working again would be my number one priority, period.
Great.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, all right.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm a little surprised that with one small exception, I'm not hearing any Republican candidates talk about an economic vision for the state. And I just love to hear what's your vision and what do you do as governor to
You haven't
turn
asked,
this-
Right.
you haven't asked a question.
Well, here we are. We are at the question.
I answered it last night.
Go ahead.
So,
Go ahead.
Again, my business background experience, to small to large to in between. Oregon rests upon its small businesses to thrive. And the best way to turn around, jumpstart, or grow jobs is through small business. They have the ability to hire 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 people if they have the support system.
So what would you do as governor to create a better climate for small businesses?
I would stop the over-regulation of the small business.
Give us an
would
example.
stop
Such a wonderfully hoary chestnut. Give us a specific example.
the wage an hour, having overtime over 40 for agricultural workers is killing. I just left Medford. It's killing the farmers down there, the pear growers.
Okay, so you get rid of overtime pay over 40 for agricultural work?
For agricultural, you wanted an example of regulations.
That's a very specific example.
That's a very specific example.
Okay.
There's probably, the other one is regulation and taxes, and providing incentives for small businesses to grow. Perhaps even setting up some, if you're under 10 employees, if you're under 20 employees, before certain laws will kick in, or taxes kick in. And I think that growing our small business base is the fastest way. We have an economic recession coming up, or those who are experiencing it right now, is through fertilizing the small business every which way we can.
So government support for small business.
Government support for small business in 2 ways: in reducing the tax burden, incentivizing them to grow, and be careful of how you're regulating them, because those are causing increased costs, which disincentivizes them to grow their business.
And is there a 21st century industry that you think Oregon has the potential to be a leader on, that it's not? If only there was a governor with some vision who said, I want to be the crypto capital of the United States, like the mayor of Miami did, or...
I think it's hard to do that, because you have to have a pretty big genie ball to see exactly where that's going to go.
Right.
I think the best thing for you to do is to provide the incentives for that business to grow here, for people to come here and say, I want to be in Oregon, or an existing Oregon business. I want to grow. I'm going to split off. We're going to make those printers here. We're going to get those cartridges. We're going to start something here, because this is where we want to be, because it's a good business climate to start a business.
Okay.
Can I just intervene here? Both of you said that there's a recession on the horizon. Did I miss an economic indicator? Or is this because the yield curve's inverted? What is the evidence that there's a recession coming? By a lot of measures, the Oregon economy's never been stronger. I mean, if you look at, the problem doesn't seem to be businesses, it seems to be finding employees in those businesses. So
It's workforce.
Well, traditionally,
what is the evidence that we're heading for this recession?
well, I read my business information journals every single day. Yesterday, even on CNBC, which I think is a fantastic program, they had the several business professors on, and another strong economist saying the recession's
What's
coming.
the strong economy? Something with a good reputation?
From Wharton School of Business.
Okay, so is there an economic indicator?
so-
regardless, I mean,
So
it seems like right now the problem we face is workforce shortages and inflation, which are different from recession, which both of you have said is coming. I just wondered what's the...
Recessions happen on a regular basis. We haven't had one for a while. Oregon's usually the first to get in and last to get out, if you looked at history. I'm just saying in the next 9 to 24 months, it is strongly anticipated a recession is going to hit. And I'm just saying that if government is ready for it, if we can be ready for it, or when it does hit, because they're hard to guess exactly when it's going to come and what's going to cause it, that you're ready for it. Did you have a plan?
Okay.
Let's move this along a little bit and give the other candidates an answer an opportunity to answer on the economy. Bridget, do you want to?
Sure. I think, I hope we would all agree that Oregon seems to have, if not cultivated, certainly earned somehow a very anti-business attitude across the country. And that has to be fixed. We've got and that comes from the governor, and it comes from just really the bully pulpit speaking out about it. And as Christine mentioned earlier, all the appointments that you make to your agencies, boards, and commissions that set out a new picture of that. I want to say something specific. You know, I don't often mention this, but my husband worked in government for his whole career. And through that time, he would see these ups and downs. But generally speaking, it was an effort often for him to have a sort of the businesses and the people out there are the customer attitude, as opposed to this gotcha mentality that so many agencies seem to have when they go out and work with businesses. So that is what my directive and vision would be to every agency is you are there, of course, to enforce the rules, but to help businesses do things right, not to catch them doing things wrong. That would be an absolute turnaround for a lot of the agencies out there right now. I hear it when I go to small businesses that that's what they're facing all the time. That's got to stop. That's at a very micro level. At a more macro level, as governor, I would immediately, in my first 4 years, no additional new regulations on businesses. We're going to have a moratorium on it. No new taxes on business during my first 4 years in office. A moratorium. Let them get back on their feet. The idea that we actually passed any tax increases on businesses during COVID, I think, is horrifying. And it's why we have earned this reputation for being anti-business.
Great.
Stan, you want to answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. You know, for us, it would be an issue of leadership and, you know, walking around and really propping up Oregon as a place that should be friendly to do business. We would do things, for example, like stand up for the folks in Coos Bay that, you know, had the Jordan Cove project that was taken right out, you know, from underneath that. That would have meant, you know, potentially thousands of jobs in a region that was, you know, suffering in the wake of a once great timber industry. In addition to those jobs, and that pipeline project would have, you know, made that Coos Bay port, you know, a deep water port and the largest port, you know, between Tacoma and San Francisco. And you think about the logistical logjam, the inflation issues, you know, that could have been something that we could have stepped up and really helped provide. I think Christine was the one that mentioned earlier, you know, the agency heads and the ability to appoint those folks and get folks in there that understand, you know, what's happening on the ground. I like to say that, you know, we're going to be doing more. We need more paper in Oregon when I'm governor, because we're going to, you know, be out with pink paper with all the pink slips that we're handing out. So the regulatory state that's been talked about, we've got it. We need tax reform. We need more transparency in how we pay our taxes. You know,
Dan, who's the first agency head you're going to fire?
The first. Well, it's going to be clean house on day one, but you know, I would say the first would have to be myself as the charge of the Oregon Department of Education. Right now, we have a top-down approach where the governor is essentially, you know, in charge of our education system. It should be bottom-up. I would put parents in charge of our education system and local control, but we'd also be one that would look to make major reforms in the Oregon Health Authority and others as well.
All right, thank you. Christine.
Yeah, thank you guys. So I think that it cannot be overlooked that everyone right now is having a hard time finding workers. Mm-hmm. And that is impacting growth. It's impacting the existing kind of businesses that are here in Oregon and their ability to stay here and continue to grow. So you've got to do what you can around workforce. Some of that's training, but it really is a challenge across sectors. And then you have associated with that quality of life, whether or not people want to come and move here, whether or not they actually want to accept a job here, is in fact impacting businesses right now. And the last thing on that list, in addition to regulatory environment matters, tax environment matters, we are one of the highest tax states in the nation for businesses. You can't get around that. But the last issue there too is housing. So all these things are connected. So if you don't have housing that workers can afford to move here and accept, or come up to whatever community you're offering the job to be able to go into that community and actually have a place to live, that all affects whether or not we're growing our own here in Oregon. And so it's very connected. And it's like the ripple in the pool. It's not just one thing. But the way that we have, the way that our business environment has been so harsh right now, is that we have had single party control that has wanted on every subject matter to be tall, thin, and rich. And all of that burden is put onto businesses. It's in some form or another, meaning the regulatory environment can't just meet one aim, it's always got to meet a triple aim. And when you add requirements, you add complexity, and in fact you add costs. And all of that gets handed on down to business. I'm not saying some of that isn't well-intentioned and well-meaning, but not all of it is the role of business.
So let's just drill down for 1 second, though.
Yeah.
You're the first candidate to zero in on the idea that right now we have a labor shortage.
Mm-hmm.
But you haven't actually offered, except for housing, which I will grant is a good point,
Right.
you haven't actually offered a policy prescription for how you would deal with that labor shortage.
Well, we have right now folks that, I mean, it's not like our unemployment numbers are through the roof, but we have seen that people have
They're
not.
the opposite.
They're the opposite.
Yeah.
And so the question is, where did the workers go? Did they stop looking for work? Are they disengaged? Are they in the gig marketplace? They have a side hustle on Etsy? Are our jobs not flexible enough? Like, what is going on? But people have not, in the same numbers that we would have expected, jumped back
Do you think
in.
immigration has
post-COVID.
anything to do with that?
I think immigration always has
I mean,
something
do you
to do
think
with it.
that immigration, we scared off a lot of immigrants during the Trump years, and maybe you can't find people?
Well, I can tell you that the decision was brought up earlier today as it relates specifically to the ag community, is that in some cases, people are cutting off their nose to spite their own face when it comes to support for jobs that are actually in the immigrant community in particular. People who are well-intentioned and trying to do this ag overtime thing, what they're going to end up doing is reducing pay for people that come to the United States to be able to support their families and do jobs that need to be done, that support our entire food industry in the state of Oregon is dependent on those jobs. And so you now have created an environment where you're saying, we want to do this ag overtime thing, but it's going to mean people are limited in how much money they can earn. So will they come here or will they go somewhere else? And what is that going to do to farmers? Will we have less jobs in that particular category because they're going to do everything they can to instead go to automation?
Yeah.
Are they going to grow different crops that don't
Can
require
we talk about
more-
something right here, right now, though?
Wait,
This
so,
immigrant thing.
I think we've arrived at an answer on that. And we're gonna move right along, and we are gonna move to, you get to ask a question to one of your opponents. I would ask that it be a serious question. In the past, we've had people ask about their pets, not allowed, we'll skip that. But we'll start with you, Christine. Can you choose one of your opponents?
One of your opponents that's here or stands
that's
in
here or
the spot.
stand on the
You don't get to ask
stand on the
that
phone.
question.
And you can choose the same opponent.
Yeah, so I have to think about this. What do I want to know from you guys? I feel like I've heard it all.
I know.
Do you guys feel like you've heard it all?
Stan, do you have a question while Christine's
I'm
thinking that
thinking,
you'd like to
Stan.
ask an opponent?
I'm not gonna jump in front of the line to go first here, but I'll have
Yeah, you can jump the line, Stan.
Jesus.
Bunch it. I'm just thinking about it. What do I not know?
All right,
What-
we're gonna
what
give you guys
question-
30 seconds to think
what-
of it,
what-
and then this is a sign of how well you can think on your feet.
What-
So
Are you
if don't
ready?
have an answer.
Yeah. And I would ask, ideally would draw a distinction, because again, we're here to make a decision about you.
Yeah, so I will ask Bob. Bob, do you remember when we first met? It's a very simple question.
Well, I was single for 17 years, but no, I don't. It had to be in the legislature.
It sounds
It
like a
had to
great
have been in the
story.
legislature.
What's the story?
Well, so I was staff inside the legislature during the time that Bob was a member.
Who'd you work for?
I worked for, you ready for the list? I worked for Ray, Baum,
Oh, Baumer.
Lynn
Oh,
Lundquist,
okay.
Lynn Snodgrass,
Okay.
all those guys.
yeah.
And so when we very first met, I was working in Ray's office at that time, and Bob was a frequent flyer into the office because you were committee chair, of course, at that time. And and everything was like big drama and, like a big moment. But there was always like a lot of buzz around wherever Bob went. And I can remember going out, like with big groups of people and all those kinds of things. So I guess why I was asking was I was wondering whether or not you remembered ever working together during those times.
I don't specifically remember you.
What's the point of your question?
I think that some of this.
Because if you're making a point, it's lost on me.
Yeah, no, it's a serious question, because when we were inside the state capitol and Republicans had majority control and I was staff inside the building, that was so long ago that Bob doesn't even remember it.
No, that's a point.
Remember what?
But so the point, again, the point is what?
Is that his engagement in our legislative lives was so long ago?
Well, your point is he's been out of the game for a long time.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
And he doesn't even remember it.
Which is true.
Works both ways.
Well, there's hundreds of people.
Very memorable.
I know. I guess I wasn't memorable, but that aside.
All right,
Okay.
all right, Stan.
Bob, do you have a question?
I have a question.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Mine is more serious. I'm
who?
going to take the opportunity to say, when you gave away people's gun rights,
Who are you asking the question?
to Christine,
Okay.
when you gave away people's gun rights to negotiate with Tina Kotek, how on earth could you have ever thought you could trust her? And don't you think that doesn't speak well of your judgment in negotiating?
Oh, this question cracks me up. And it's only because it's so
The rest of us
remarkably-
don't think it's funny.
It's so remarkably disingenuous. Because of course I voted against Senate Bill 554, the gun bill, and I voted against it because it was a bad piece of legislation. And as the House Republican leader, I had every obligation and every opportunity inside that building with that responsibility to stand up against single party control. And the deal that I made on my side was a deal that I kept. The fact that Tina Kotek didn't keep her deal speaks to her character, not mine. And I made a deal with Tina Kotek because what matters is how our redistricting maps turned out, that we got fair maps for the state of Oregon, that voters actually get a fair shot at choosing their own elected officials.
Are you happy
And
with
that
that?
politicians do not pick
You
their own
like
people.
the redistricting plan?
No. That was what the agreement was, to have equal representation on the redistricting committee.
But you
which is
should
what
have known
Tina
she was
Kotek
going to cheat
abandoned.
you.
You know what? Knowing what somebody else is going to do in the future does not necessarily mean that you do not pursue the best possible outcome.
Okay, Stan, your turn.
Yeah, just let me say, Bridget, I find it funny you're saying that because, when we were talking earlier, Christine was talking about Betsy Johnson and Tina Kotek, and we know how those negotiations go. We know how they go when Christine's in the middle of them too, right? They go badly. They do not go.
Stan, what's your question?
I guess the question I would ask, I'll just ask Christine. Christine, you're on the airways right now, saying that you support the police. This is, right after, taking votes to, hamstring police officers and how they deal with riots in Portland. This is after voting, after Tina Kotek's staffer, was arrested for out there on, the rioting on the streets. Voted to, allow folks to disobey the orders of a police officer and continue on rioting. How do you put together, putting hundreds of thousands of dollars in an ad campaign that say one thing about your leadership when your votes clearly say something else?
Is there a specific vote you're talking about?
A series of
I
votes
just
she
named
made.
like 3 of them.
So I think what's important to know about the legislative process is that I only supported legislation that was supported by law enforcement. And over the course of those special sessions where that legislation was brought forward, I, as Republican leader, sent the cops in my caucus to the negotiating table to make recommendations on the other side to our caucus for whether or not that was legislation that they would recommend we support. We're talking about chiefs and cops in our caucus that are elected leaders. They came back to me as their Republican leader and said, we need your support on this. We fought hard. These are appropriate reforms. We need your backing. And I said, yes, We're there with you. Thank you for your good hard work. And oh, by the way, the chiefs of police and the sheriffs all supported that legislation, or our caucus would not have backed it.
But you were the minority leader. Why didn't you
I don't
stand
think it's
up
your turn,
publicly and say, I'm being forced to do this, even though I find this a very unfortunate
Okay.
negotiating position?
So if I haven't lost track,
Yeah, it's Bob.
Bob, you haven't asked a question of an opponent.
I haven't.
Yeah.
Can I tell you why I'm not going to ask a question? I don't think it's productive. As a former chairman of the party, and even if I wasn't chairman, I think we're all running our own races. We all have our own reasons why we're running. I think if we all focus on what we intend to do and what we're about and what our agenda is.
Fair enough.
So
Okay,
I-
I'm gonna ask you a tough question for a minute. There was an Oregonian story about you having a lawsuit in California. Can you be clear on how much time you're spending in Oregon versus California? Is your wife a resident of California?
No, she's a resident of Washington.
Okay. Misinformed there. Go ahead.
Yes,
How
thank
much
you.
time are you spending in the state?
I look after my 92-year-old mother and my 94-year-old father, and I've been doing that for the last 9 years, ever since my dad got emphysema, my mother went into a wheelchair. So I go down there at least once a week.
They're both in California.
Yes, that's where I grew up, in the house I grew up in. And I go down there, I say at least once a week. I miss a week once in a while. But, and when they need me, I fly down there. So I don't know percentage of it. I spend 60-70% of my time here. 30% if I average it out over the years, over the months. And it just depends what's happening. It's my commitment to them, and I take it very personally. And I wrote a letter to the editor in response to that. I hope you saw that.
Oh, I actually didn't read that, so I will have to
You should
check
read
it
that,
out.
because I had to correct
Okay.
them on several points.
Okay.
Have they issued any corrections?
Pardon?
Have they issued any corrections?
No, they haven't.
Well, they asked me whether I wanted the clarification or correction. I said, well, I'll clarify it.
Okay.
And it was a lead editorial, guest editorial in the
Okay.
Wednesday newspaper.
Can I ask an oddball question that I think is telling there? So there's an effort, as you know, in rural Oregon to, I think the name of the campaign is to move Oregon's border.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask
Idaho.
this.
And it's born of the fact
Greater
that people
Idaho.
are sick
Greater
of
Idaho.
Portland
Yeah.
liberals dominating the state. I'm just wondering if you're all supportive of that effort.
Can I answer? I mean,
I want all of you to answer.
You haven't had much chance to talk.
I haven't had much chance to talk. I'd like to correct both of these on agency heads and so, and some other things that came up. I'll answer your question just 1 second. On the agency heads, look out for what you wish for. We have some good agency heads, and you just don't wholesale throw 60 people under the bus until you do a real thoughtful evaluation on what their job performance is and how well they do. Good managers are hard to find, so I'd be careful on wholesale fire everybody. I think that's a mistake. I do think there should be some turnover. To your question, I've had a house in Fossil for 25 years. I have a shared place with my parents in Sun River for the last 40 years, where we spend every single Christmas. I didn't average that into how much time I spend in California.
Though you didn't quite answer all of my questions. If your wife lives in Washington, how much time are you in Washington?
How much time I spend in Washington? Not very much. 5 times, 6 times a year.
So
So in Eastern Oregon, the governor has to be the governor for all of Oregon. I just left Klamath Falls in a meeting in Medford, and I spent a lot of time in Eastern Oregon, and they feel like they're just a stepchild, and that the sun sets in Portland and rises in Portland, and that's their feeling. And what a governor's got to do is got to get out of the office. It's got to be in all parts of the state. It's got to trade a problem in Fossil or a problem in Brookings is a problem in Portland. And they don't feel like their problems are being acknowledged or even addressed, whether it's the water problems in...
Totally understood. So the answer to the question is, do you support that effort or not?
No, I do not.
You do not support the effort to move Oregon's borders?
No, I do not. I think what we need to do is just have a governor who's going to be a governor for everybody.
Okay. Christine? No? Bridget?
Same, governor's got to bring them back into the state.
Stan?
No, people are going to be moving here wanting to link to the border. when I go.
Yep.
Can you, I feel like Christine's question maybe wasn't the most direct version of this. Let me try the direct version. Why are you back in Oregon politics after so long? Or why are you trying to get back into?
Trying to get back in?
I mean, why are you running for office after so
I'm
long
very-
out of Oregon politics?
Well, and you're also one of the latest to toss your name in.
Yes. Okay,
So the question is-
that was strategy. When I was in the let me just set the record straight. When I was in the legislature, I never missed a dollar. I kept my business going full time. There's about 5 of us who did that. And I've kept my business going full time. I was in the legislature, then I came back to the party because they were imploding, and I came back and bailed that out. This time, I feel that the state of Oregon is in, the fact that we're not solving our problems. And when I look at who was running and what was happening, that we needed somebody who had the skill, the responsibility, the proven experience to solve these big problems. Some people think leadership just comes by self-proclamation. It comes from experience. It comes through being there and doing that and getting it done. And so I saw our problems as being unsolvable by the current administrations, and they needed somebody who had some business and experience of solving those things. That's what I do. That's why I decided to run.
So tell us about your strategy of why you filed late or announced late. What's the strategic benefit?
Well, there's 3 benefits. One's a personal benefit, that you don't lose your privacy until late in the game. The second one is you're saving money because you're not spending money for the 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 months beforehand, and you have an overhead. My overhead right now is still about $6,500, $7,000 a month versus $40 or $50 for others. So you save money. Lastly, there's no reason, the reason why we have a filing deadline is that's the period of time that you will need in order to launch a good campaign. I didn't feel that we needed to go in early, that going in late was going to be a money saving, a privacy saving, and give us an advantage in both those areas.
Okay.
We are out of time.
Can we just ask quickly, what's the one endorsement or campaign contribution you're most proud of that you've received? Stan, you want to start?
Yeah.
Who's written you a check that you're most happy about?
Oh man, I would just, it's hard to answer that question. We have over, 2,000 contributions, I guess the best way for me to answer that is just to say, I'm a small town mayor, middle class guy, living in a middle class house. And the idea that I've raised over $1 million from 2,000 people across the state at an average donation worth $300. I would never thought that I would be sitting here raising those kinds of resources and having the kind of support, 36 county chairs, around the state. That's what I'm most proud of. Bob talks about strategic decision to get in at the end. We started with a listening tour. We're on a bus tour, in Ontario right now, with my family in tow. I just think the opportunity to meet Oregonians and to get that kind of support, I can't believe the support that we've gotten on this. That's what I'm most proud of.
Go ahead, Bridget.
You asked earlier, I think you might have, about maybe a business that could be a developing business in the state. And so one of the contributions I'm the most proud of, have you all had a chance to see the new airport terminal, the
PDX.
ceiling with the MPP, the beautiful display.
Mm-hmm.
What a way to bring people into Oregon. And that is from the MPP plant that's run by the Ferris family. So I am very happy to be supported strongly by that family. I do think they're leading the way on technology in forestry that is a real path forward for Oregon. So I'm very proud of that. As an endorsement, I'm very proud that I'm endorsed by Right to Life.
Great.
So Freyr's is giving money to you,
Yes.
but aren't they also giving money to Betsy?
A little too, you gotta sprinkle it,
Okay.
you know how you gotta
So
pay the piper.
You got more?
Oh, yes,
Right.
substantially.
And they're a long time. You've had a long time.
We have a long relationship, yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, Bob, endorsement you're proud of or a donation you're proud of?
I think the smallest checks from the people I don't know is the,
Any endorsements that you're particularly proud of?
Did you ever get the $5 from
from that lady.
the street roots vendor?
You know, I don't think so. But I do all my, I do all,
That's a reference to a street roots vendor stopped by his
Tried to give me $5.
his press conference announcing and tried to give him $5.
I write personal thank yous to everybody who donates, and so I look at all the checks, and then I write a personal note to them, and I'm just impressed. People you don't even know giving you $5, $10, $25 is impressive to me.
But any institutional endorsement that you're particularly proud of
No?
because you're not proud of them or because you haven't received any?
I've received several institutional. It's not, I'm proud of it. I know who I am. I know what I can do. I don't need to have
Yeah, but
endorsements.
we don't know who you are. We don't know what
Oh, I
you can
think
do.
you do.
So we want the imprimatur of you telling us.
Go to my website. It'll be more than you can stomach. And I say that because everything about me, from my early career, which you were very familiar with, I remember you very well,
Mhm.
very a leader in your own right. It's all there. And
Okay,
you can-
Christine, any endorsee or?
So I sort of feel the same way about the contribution side of things. I think that the people that put a $5 check in the mail and say that they're retired and they just want to support the future of their own state, I mean, that's really incredible. I mean, they took the time to do that, and so anything that is support from somebody like that's
So here,
meaningful.
Rachel, I'm sorry, last question.
Yeah.
You can't vote for yourself under our rules. Who would you vote for in the primary?
That's a dangerous question.
That's a good one. I haven't heard you ask that one before. and
Am I
I'm
allowed to
just-
ask that question?
Yeah,
No,
sure.
I vote no.
Sure.
So Christine, you can't vote for yourself.
Yeah,
Who's the next best choice to lead this state?
I'd vote for Bob.
Okay, Bob,
Boy, I'm not going to answer your question.
you don't give an opportunity to be a gentleman here.
I am a gentleman, and that won't make me a gentleman.
So really,
It's who you are. You can't run away from it.
seriously, who?
Nobody's good enough. That's why he's in.
You know, I'll go back to what I said before. I just don't think it's productive to.
All right.
I agree with him. I don't think that's a productive
All right,
question.
I
Stan.
don't want anyone, we need to unite as a
Oh,
party.
you guys, really? Really, you
My
guys?
honest answer to that is that you're the only person who respects us enough to answer the question.
Oh my goodness! Come
It has
on.
nothing to do with respect.
It has everything to do with respect.
Well, I'm not-
You're pledging to endorse the nominee after this. Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Whoever that is.
All right, well, one final question. What?
the third time we've heard that.
We have a fun question.
Oh,
And
good.
you should know from
That
past
wasn't
election
it?
cycles.
That last one was a
This is
blast.
actually not one of those that's completely awkward. It's just what back to normal joy has stood out to you as the pandemic has.
Was there a moment when you
wound
said,
down? Yeah.
oh, this might be over and God, it's great?
Or the phase.
For Aaron, it was he went to a Blazers game without
Yeah.
masks. So we're looking for that, sort of a humanizing example of when you felt, oh, this may pass.
I'm anxious to get back to concerts. I haven't had any free time, but
We're
I
looking for something that you have already
have not done those things yet.
You went to a restaurant without masks and all of a sudden.
Well, I mean, let's be honest, we were doing that before the end of masking requirements. I mean,
Of course you were.
so yeah. So that transition for me happened maybe a little bit earlier.
Dan, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been on an airplane and I still had to wear a mask. The flight's not over. I'm not going to sit back and say that we're out of this thing yet until we're actually out of this thing.
I didn't wear a mask, but I was very seldom did I ever wear a mask. But I was really happy to be able to go back to church finally and have people not have masks on. But I found that very annoying to have to
How
go to
long
church.
was that?
Oh, not that long.
Recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Whenever they finally lifted it is when I'm Catholic, so they followed the
They
rules.
followed the rules.
Yeah. I mean, the Christian churches, some of them didn't follow the rules. The Catholic Church, we always follow the rules.
I'm Irish by background, of course, therefore my father is too. I took him out for a beer at his favorite bar, and we miss that. When I go down there, we always go out and solve some problems of the world together. And we did it and a memorable time.
We kind of skipped over you stumbling towards an answer there. Do you have a back to normal joy you've experienced at some point in this time?
I just feel like it's been so slow in coming that it is, there wasn't like a particular moment for me where I was like, okay, we're all back. I did appreciate going back to church without masks. I did appreciate the fact that, my kids could go to school without masks. That was a big deal for them. And so like each bit of it has been welcome, but no, I didn't like have a moment where I woke up one day and said,
So maybe after the primary you get some joy like the rest of us have.
Yes.
Thank you very much
Did
for
any
coming.
of your families get COVID?
Thank you, Stan.
Thank you.
Anybody
Appreciate you all
Thank
taking the time.
If you two would be willing to stop
Nobody in my
upstairs
immediate
for a
family
photo
did,
after
but
this.
I
Thank
feel
you.
like
Yeah, you bet.
It was nice to chat with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be